everybody, and welcome to Taking Control, the ADHD podcast on True Story FM. I'm Pete Wright, and I'm here with Nikki Kinzer.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Pete Wright.
Nikki, we got so excited in our pre-show chat, we almost forgot to start the show.
I know.
There was hardcore education happening, and I can't wait to get back into it in media res. For people who are members in your personal podcast feed, you'll get the little taste in our ADHD entertainment clutch. And now we're getting into it proper. Before we dive in on our day of memory, a quick request. If this podcast has ever helped you make sense of your brain's beautiful chaos, consider becoming a patron. It's like subscribing to our executive function. Your support helps us keep the gears turning, the thoughts connecting, and the episodes coming. Just head over to patreon.com/theADHDpodcast and toss a coin to your podcasters. While you're multitasking your way through all of that, head to takecontroladhd.com. That's our digital HQ where you can stream episodes, sign up for the weekly email, and find us across the social media spectrum. That's Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest. Basically, if it has a scroll bar, we're probably there. And if you've ever wished for a space where people won't judge your tab count, to-do list, or dopamine-driven deep dives, our Discord community is calling. It's friendly, free, and full of folks who speak fluent distraction. Visit takecontroladhd.com/discord to sign in and say hello. Today, we're talking about one of the most frustrating and misunderstood challenges of ADHD, memory. Why do we forget names, appointments, entire conversations? Is it really memory that's failing us, or is there something deeper, something else going on? To help us unpack the science and the lived experience of ADHD and memory, we are joined by Dr. Daniella Karidi, Ph.D., executive coach and founder of ADHDtime. She brings to us a deep expertise in cognitive science, executive functioning, and neurodiverse coaching across the lifespan. Daniella, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me here.
We are thrilled to have you, and you're just dripping with knowledge about this stuff, and I can't wait to just bathe in it. First, let's just set the table with an understanding of memory challenges in ADHD. What is a good mental model for us to think about how our memory is affected with ADHD? Working memory, short-term, long-term, how does it manifest across the scope of memory?
So I will start with the basic thing that if we come out with today will be amazing. Forgetting is not the enemy. So if you imagine that you would remember everything, including that, the kid that sat next to you in third grade and farted, like you don't need to remember everything. Remembering everything is a problem, right?
Right.
So our goal is not to remember everything. Our goal is to remember what's important. And the other thing that we need to understand is that our memory is not a machine. It's not like you put everything in and it automatically comes out as one thing. What happens is there's steps, and these steps are very, very fragile. So let me explain. First, we need to encode information. That's step one. So you hear a sound, you smell a smell, you taste a taste, you see something, and you need to convert that into a memory. So that is the encoding stage. The next stage is the storage stage, where you put the things in different places in your brain. And the last stage is the retrieval stage, when you take it out. We kind of have this illusion that everything happens at once. We also think that it all happens automatically. And we also believe that it's like forever. We put something on the shelf, it's going to stay on that shelf.
Well, this is the executive function challenge, right? Like we don't often think about how we think about things.
Right. Right. So when we talk about memory, we understand that the more steps there is, the more fragile it is, right? So if I tell you, can you tell me where we met? Okay, that's trying to remember the past. That is talking about something that happened in the past. And I'm asking you, or if I ask you, what's the capital of the United States? That's, again, asking some information that you should have collected in the past. It's stored somewhere in your brain, and now you need to retrieve it. But if I ask you, take your medication at 7 p.m. tonight, I'm asking you to remember to do something in the future. Now, I'm making it even harder. I'm adding to the 3 basic steps of memory additional steps that require you to not only to remember to execute something, I'm asking you to keep it for a certain amount of time, be triggered by something like a clock or an event, and then executing. That is prospective memory. That's the hardest type of memory, and that's the one where ADHD struggles the most.
So I have a client who struggles with, well, one client. I'm going to say all my clients probably struggle with this.
and many of your friends and colleagues.
And many of my friends and family members. And yeah, and I don't know if this is past or future, you put something down, but you can't remember where you put it down. And now you're searching for it. Is that like, where does that fall?
So here's it depends on the situation. It might be past, it might be future, but that falls under usually not encoding the information. So when we're doing something that we're doing it without intention, we're not putting the attention to. So I can take my book that I'm reading and I can just put it by wherever I left. Okay, suddenly there's a doorbell. I leave my book and that information did not encode. But if I'm a librarian and I put the book on the shelf in the right spot and I followed a system, a decimal system, that is encoding it in a systematic aware. And what happens with ADHD, we are very, very distracted. So we are not putting the effort in encoding the information in a way that we can retrieve it when we need it.
Okay.
I'm writing this down. This is good stuff.
So what you're doing when you're writing something down, you're telling to yourself, you're acknowledging that you're not going to remember it.
Yep.
You're using a strategy like writing down to enforce the information, but the challenge will be remembering where you wrote this down.
Right. Yes.
So write another Post-it note that says,
that
remember
I wrote
that one
notes
thing
from the podcast in memory in my notebook.
This is where I may be jumping ahead, but you hear pundits, where the pundits live, and they say things like, you have ADHD, get rid of your notes and memory, and you're failing yourself. You're doing yourself a disservice to your own memory, the muscle, the sort of intellectual muscle that you need to develop by making so many notes. How do you address comments like that?
So memory is a skill we do develop, and the strategies around encoding, storing, retrieving improve as we age and as we use them. So if you're a little kid, we're not expecting you to do the same thing as we expect a 17-year-old or an adult. So yes, memory can be trained and can be improved, but it has so many limitations and challenges that any strategy that you can use to support it, especially as an adult where you already developed the skills, the basic capacity. Let me explain what I mean. Working memory is a type of memory that we talk about a lot in ADHD, and people don't totally understand it. So working memory is a type of short-term memory. Short-term memory is everything between a 0 to a minute. After a minute, we're already in long-term memory.
Wow.
After a
I
minute,
never understood that. Okay.
everything above a minute is already considered in memory research long-term.
Okay.
Our brain should have already encoded it and stored it somewhere. So our notepad for short-term memory is very short, very, very short. Inside that notepad, there's something that professionals like to call working memory. Now, what makes working memory special? It's because there's a job that happens. There's working that happens. It's a manipulation of information. So the example I like to give people is like math, basic math, 1 + 2. You're doing that in your working memory if you're doing it in your brain and not on a piece of paper. If I pull up 2 ties and I ask you, which one should I take, the red or the green? That decision-making is happening in your working memory. The working memory has to be doing a job, making a decision, calculating math, making change, translating a word from one language to another language if you're a multi-language speaker. Those are things that we do in the working memory, but it's up to a minute. The minute we pass the minute, we're already using our long-term memory skills and no longer using working memory.
All right. Wow.
So, all right, help me conceptualize that. What should my effort be then to outlast the minute if I want that memory to be most effective, or to finish the processing in under 60 seconds?
So the effort would be to create structures in your brain that will shift things as quick as possible and as solid as possible into your long term. So it's
Okay.
not trying to manipulate the short term because that is limited. So I had a researcher in one of our labs, and he did 25 years of research on working memory, trying to improve his working memory. And there's a limit to that capacity. We call that limit a 7-digit limit, a 7 2 plus. So plus 2 to like, so you can push it to 9,
Yeah.
or you can go down to
Right.
5, but that's the limit. That's why phone numbers, by the way, are chunked,
Yeah.
because we could not remember
Right.
the long. So we're chunking stuff. So chunking is an
Right.
example of a strategy that you can use to increase your working memory capacity.
Sure.
So when you talk
Okay.
about that kid that can repeat the whole, pie, unlimited
Yeah.
pie,
Right.
he is already putting it in his long-term memory. And what he's doing in his short term, he's just retrieving. He's just retrieving.
Okay. This I want to take a digression, and because I read a book a long time ago that I've always been fascinated by, if not successful in implementing myself. It was called The Memory Palace of Matteo Ricci, and
Yep.
it was the story of the, you're familiar with the book, it's the story of the priest who goes to China, and the entire thing that he offers to teach was like, if I can teach you, religion. If you'll let me teach you religion, I'll also teach you this memory technique. And that was how it was essentially building a palace in your mind that you knew to such a degree of intimacy, that you could essentially place memories in rooms in this giant palace in your brain that would help you to retrieve them later. And YouTube is rife with people who swear that up and down that they've built their memory palaces. Do you have a memory palace, and what color is it?
So I have a picture of a library, and that is my version of a memory palace. I
Okay.
kind of like put things, I use my brain. I kind of like imagine a library where I put things on the shelf and take them off when I need them. And I consciously tell myself, put it back on the shelf, put it back in the right space, create a trail, breadcrumb trail, how to remember things. Um, I think that the idea that comes behind the memory palace that can be used for people with ADHD is the idea of putting effort in remembering things, building a routine about remembering. So it could be a palace, which is hard to relate to because I don't know about you, but I don't have palaces in my everyday life that I can like
No.
imagine easily.
No.
Unless we're talking about Disney and that palace, I don't know, a little too much exposure. But
Right.
the point is that
You could get distracted pretty easily.
Well,
there
and
you
there are
go.
other
You got a
There-
Disney
there's
palace.
so many tourists moving my stuff around too.
Exactly. Exactly. And then they just went and repainted it. I don't know
Right?
what to do with that.
Right, yeah.
God, it's just all my shelves are churros.
So, so the idea has to be that it has to be something that relates to your life.
That you relate
And
to.
And when we talk about memory in general, when we talk about memory challenges and we talk about memory successes, we learn that the number one trick, especially with brains that are fragile, like ADHD brains, is creating connections that are meaningful. So using stories, using family experiences, using rooms in your own house that you can imagine in your sleep are helpful into trying to build these structures. But what makes it really important is the building the structure. So when I talk with parents and they tell me, well, my kid keeps on forgetting, like I ask 3 important questions. Did you provide enough information for remembering? And the example I use for adults is if I tell you on the way home, buy milk, okay? On the way home from work, I need you to pick up milk. That example relates to a lot of us. Oh, yeah, we always have to do things on the way and from places. So that's relatable. But I don't know what about you guys, but for me, milk can be a very general kind of conversational thing. Milk is oat milk, it can be coconut milk, it can be milk for my coffee, it can be milk. So it would have been helpful if I knew why. Who needs this milk? Oh, we need the milk for your coffee tomorrow morning. I might be a little more motivated than I need the milk for Aunt Betty that's coming to visit. Or actually, ADHDers tend to be motivated for others more than for ourselves. So maybe I will remember to buy the milk for Betty. But the point is that knowing the why helps our ADHD brain remember better. So if I would have just said, hey, on the way home, can you get me coconut milk for my coffee? And don't get me almond milk because I'm allergic. So coconut milk for my coffee. And if I made the question even easier, I'd say like, hey, on the way home from work, is there any grocery stores? And you kind of, in your brain now, you're driving home from work, you're thinking about the route. So I
Yeah.
encouraged a path for you to remember.
Which
And
I'm already familiar with.
and then you said, yeah, there's the one with the green awning, that one like has a good parking lot. I'm like, great. So on the way home, can you stop at the green awning grocery store and pick up coconut milk for my coffee?
Hmm.
I gave you a
Okay.
why, I gave you a where, and I related it to your life. Now, is that easy to do? Hell no. Is that
Right.
time consuming? Yes. Will that help your child? Yes. Will that help your spouse? Yes. Is it something you'll do all the time? No. But if you do it enough times, you'll create these systems that will support an increased memory.
Let's transition, because right now we're talking about giving something for someone else to do, right? Helping with compensation strategies for other people. What if I just have some new things in my life that I want to remember more effectively myself? How do I employ these same I don't want to call them tricks, strategies, right? Accommodations to improve my own memory without the help of a buddy.
So the one thing you can look at that is if this is something that you want to remember about the past or the future. So really thinking about, is this, my kid is going to college and I want to remember their first Advent weekend. So it's about trying to remember the past. Or, oh my God, I'm going to prepare for a conference. I want to remember to bring this and that and do these things. It's a new experience. I need to like prepare. And that's about remembering for the future.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding the difference between the two will help us figure out what strategies to use. So even consciously thinking about, okay, this new thing I need to do is I need to take a new medication. I need to take antibiotics. I need to take a new medication. So how do I remember? Oh, this is something for the future. So I need to think about future strategies that future me can use. Okay. One of the things we need to look at is is the context I'm going to be doing this remembering. Am I going to be doing this remembering in my kitchen or in my office or where is this remembering occurring? We sometimes only think about what we need to remember and we don't always think about where we need to remember it. So if I need to remember it in the kitchen, maybe the cues I want to use to support the memory are going to be in the kitchen.
That's the thing, right? Because I have my undergraduate unfinished. I have an unfinished undergraduate psychology degree, and so that's 30 years old. Trash psychology. But one of the things I remember is that when I studied, I would be in a certain state of caffeination and physical activity. I liked to move a lot when I studied. And one of the things that I did poorly on my exams was recalling that information until I walked out of the exam room and started moving again and walking on the brick walls and things like that. And then I could remember every question that I missed on the exam. This leads us down this path of state dependence. And I think you're getting there, like thinking about remembering things in the future is projecting my state when I'm going to be remembering this thing. How much of a myth is state dependence when it comes to memory? It feels like it's maybe not that much of a myth at all.
So as everything, it depends on what we're trying to remember. So when we talk about studying for exams or like preparing for a recital, state dependence is very important, actually. So that's why kids do better on the exam when it's done in the same class. They study the material.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's an example of that. Or even why some professional pianists, when they're doing their concert, they bring their bench. Okay, they ship their bench with them. And part of that is this state dependence performance. But that becomes to retrieval a lot more than future execution.
Okay.
So that is more about studying for exams, which we can talk about another time.
Okay.
But when
Fair.
we're talking about remembering things in our everyday life, that is less state dependent. It's more cue dependent. And what do I mean by that? So what is the cue that will execute the remembering? So for example, if we need to take the cookies out of the oven, a good cue could be a timer, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because that is a cue that could be relating to managing time. But a timer might not be a good cue to remembering to call your grandma, like, because that is
Mhm.
not a, so the
You're going to
cue to
ignore it.
execute, right? The cue to execute the action is really important in remembering, not so much the state. So which I'm changing a bit the vocabulary here, and I'm
Please,
putting
yeah.
emphasis on what are we using to remember the task we need to perform.
So one of the strategies that because I will coach college students, and one of the strategies that I talk to them about is to switch their to change where they're studying. And so what I'm understanding from you is that the science behind that is because you retain more of, like, you remember that I was in the library when I studied this section.
So I think the difference when we're talking about performing an exam and studying material in college and in tests, it's very different. There's different things. So the example I can think about is if you're studying for like a chemistry test, okay? When you go to study in the lab where the chemistry test will be occurring, there's something that triggers your brain to retrieve chemistry information. There's some link there that helps your brain kind of, oh, I'm in chemistry studying mode. I need to take out my chemistry information. I'm going to do better on this test because I'm in this lab. Versus if I take you to the different chemistry lab in another totally different building where you're not familiar, it might not create the same level of trigger. Even though it's a chemistry lab, it's still better than if I take you to the library.
Right.
Saying that, there's an element that works on our ADHD brain that doesn't work on other people, and that's the new element. When something is new and there's a change that happens, we create curiosity again. We're triggered again to pay attention. We're less distracted. So the example I can think about that helps people understand this is if I ask you about breakfast, what did you eat yesterday or today? Or like if you ate breakfast at home and everything was normal and nothing surprising happened, all your breakfasts are kind of mixed in your brain to one story. We kind of do that. We layer our events because they're boring and we make one story. But if I ask you about that crazy one brunch breakfast that you went with a bunch of girls and you had this like
Two
cool dish,
mimosas.
and suddenly there's like a smile, there's a memory, there's a retrieval,
Yeah.
there's a story. You can even tell me maybe how the smell was that day. So the newness, the differenceness allowed you to create a better. So when we talk about trying to learn information, our ADHD brain does benefit from having that newness. So when you tell that student, shift to the library to change the memory, you're creating that newness. So now the studying has a new story to go around it. And it
Okay.
might be helping their brain, but you also are creating a shift in the environment that helps our ADHD arousal levels and other things. So yes, this is not a black and white answer. Like it's not like
Right. Yeah. No.
if yeah, um,
But it's
being in
helpful
the
to
chemistry.
understand. Yeah.
Right, and it's helpful for understanding what changes if we're adults and we can like analyze our own behavior and we can say, yeah, chemistry, I really need to go into the lab to study. So one of the things we can do is at the end of a studying session, we can say, how easy was it to study? How hard? How much do I think I remember? Like we can go back and meta-analyze these things and help us choose better locations next time.
Let's talk about what is actually going on in the brain. We've talked a lot about our dopamine, serotonin. How does the sort of chemical impact that we already are familiar with living with ADHD impact our memory? When are we going to have the easiest time remembering new information versus the most challenging times?
So the easiest time for us to remember is when we can focus on the encoding, when we are not distracted by other things. So if you think about the brain, we want to think about it as a machine that we put in the information, it takes it and it keeps it. But it doesn't really work like that. We need to put the cognitive effort in encoding the information. And if our brain is distracted, so if you're listening to this talk while you're also doing your homework or doing something else, or washing the dishes, if the other task is cognitively demanding. So the ongoing task in addition to whatever you're doing, so listening to the talk and doing something else that's demanding, then you're reducing your chances of success because you can't put enough cognitive effort in encoding. I like to ask people that ever parented if, like, when you're holding a kid and you're trying to do something else, how much you can do with that other hand. Like, there's a few
It's a
things.
great
Oh yeah, I
example.
can like maybe feed myself, but I can't really do my like there's things I can't do with only one hand. So our memory can't work if you walk into a room and there's a lot of noise and a lot of people and someone tells you their name, if you do not put effort in encoding that information, it's not going to stay. So as ADHDers, we are more sensitive and we're more fragile and we're more tend to be distracted by things. So our biggest challenge could be the encoding stage. But then we also have the retention stage where we need to keep the information on the top of the surface. So let's say I tell you, hey, next time you see me at the ADHD conference, say hello. You're not going to walk around looking for me every day of your life, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe, I hope so. Maybe when you get to the ADHD conference, you might be like little triggered and you're like, oh, there was someone I need to say hello to. So that surfaced a bit. And by seeing my face, that could be maybe the cue to like, oh, I need to say hello to Daniella. So what's happening here with ADHD many times is we forget to shut off. We forget to say, we don't need this now. We keep it on the top, even though we don't need to remember Daniella until November, until the ADHD conference. So actively telling ourselves when we need to take this out. So saying something like, I'm studying for the chemistry test that's in Wednesday. I'll need to retrieve this on Wednesday. I'm going to go buy milk on the way home from work. I don't need to think about milk all day. I'm allowed to put this thought away and retrieve it when I'm going to the car. So how am I going to do that? Oh, maybe I'll put a Post-it in the car. Maybe I'll put an alarm. But actively understanding that the retention stage can interfere with ADHD, which it doesn't do so much for people that don't have ADHD. People that don't have ADHD look at me sometimes with that look when I tell them, you need to let go of this until November. They're like, yeah, of course we do. Like, no, you don't understand.
Yeah.
Right.
People with
Yeah.
ADHD sometimes need to say that out loud.
Yeah. I need to hear myself say it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also need to close the loop. And closing the loop is something that people without ADHD do a lot easier. And that's understanding that we did the task. So it's not laying in bed at night and reminiscing and thinking, wait, did I take that medication? Did I close the fridge? Did I go? In people that have anxiety and depression, also we find this challenge of closing the loop. We do know that people with ADHD have more comorbidities, so it's not surprising. But in general, it's paying attention that the loop has closed, which also can cause challenges. If our brain is busy thinking about the tasks we were already completed, we don't have capacity to think about the new stuff.
That's so interesting.
Amen to that. I mean, I feel like you've just described Monday through Sunday of my life.
Well, right, because you don't trust yourself that
Yeah.
you don't trust your memory, you don't trust that you did it. And so you almost assume that you didn't do it. And now I'm worried about doing something that I already did,
Yeah.
but I don't remember if I did it or not.
Yeah.
That's why
Yeah.
we talk
Yeah.
a lot about the 5 phases of perspective memory, because we say that in addition to the 3 that regular memory has, perspective memory has that time interval where you have to like wait, that waiting interval. And then you also have the evaluation of success interval, which is more challenging when you need to remember to take your medication at 7 p.m. Big fan of those little stickers next to the medication pills that you can like pull them off after you take it, or
Mhm.
even taking a marker, taking a black marker and writing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then crossing off every time you take it. It's about supporting your memory, finding the strategy that helps you support your memory. I don't know. I feel like I personally am a big subsidizer of 3M, like all their Post-its. I think I personally like,
Yeah,
but
practically a major shareholder.
yeah, should be.
Yeah.
But it's in choosing also the right one. I don't know what about you, but I have small Post-its. I have Post-its with lines. I even have poster-sized Post-its. The idea of that a Post-it needs it's if I just say use a Post-it and I don't kind of like choose the right one in the right place and the right strategy for my brain. So it's about finding the right tools and using them in the right time for increasing success.
You work with people across the lifespan. So when you're thinking about memory over long periods of time, right? We've talked about kids, we've talked about adults, students, and then, as we've talked about in this series already, the act of aging, going into older age with ADHD. At what point do you find the memory issues sort of most intense? My assumption is memory's hard with ADHD no matter how old you are, but when do we need to take steps?
So first thing, we'll go with the assumption that memory is hard no matter what, and with ADHD. I agree 100%.
Right. Check me
like,
on that.
That's like, yeah.
That's
yeah.
a script that I know too well. Yeah.
Yeah, that was my dissertation. I had to prove to people in 2011 that ADHD has prospective memory problems because there was no research out there that said it. So it was like, I experience it, I see it, but we needed the research to support it. So yes, people with ADHD have significant memory problems and prospective memory especially, and this is true for all age groups. But we know that there's a cognitive decline as we age. Part of this cognitive decline relates to, just like we talk about little kids have to develop skills and they have to develop the executive function. We're not born with a full functioning executive function. So any skill that we can develop, we can lose. It's that easy. So if you learned to use your executive function to plan, to organize, to remember, as you age, you can lose your ability to plan, to organize, to remember. So we have to understand that there's a decline that happens as we age, and there is the element of ADHD. When we talk about adults with ADHD and like retirement, when they lose structure, we find that there's more struggle. And this is consistent across all my aging clients. And actually, I have a group of moms that are, we used to call it empty nesters. Now they're like to call themselves successful launchers.
Ooh, I like that.
I like that. Yeah.
But the idea is that when we lose these structures of our life, it could be our kids going to college, it could be our retirement, it could be a spouse that passes away, a divorce. These structures supported our executive functions and supported our memory. And losing the structures makes it even harder. So if I was remembering to buy milk on the way back to work, if I'm not leaving to work, it's harder to remember to buy milk.
Right.
So losing structures makes it really challenging for aging adults. Now, I spent a lot of time training professionals in the world of memory to understand the difference between a memory decline, like Alzheimer or dementia, and ADHD. And one of the most important things I want to put up here on the table is having a skill and losing it versus not having it. So you're talking about, hey, you're saying to me, I can so relate to these memory challenges. I had these memory challenges as a kid, as a teenager, as an adult. I'm going to continue having them as I age. But now when I'll go to the doctor might think this might be Alzheimer or dementia. So it's my job to kind of say, no, I've been having these since I've been a kid. I've been having these as an adult. I've been having this as a teenager. This is not the new part. The new part is maybe I can't sleep well. The new part might be heart problems. The new part might be high blood pressure. I'm getting memory loss because of all these other stuff. That's the new part. Versus someone that did not have the skill, that had a great skill, had memory, and now they lost it. Now, does it mean you can't have Alzheimer or dementia? No. And the bad news, I'm sorry to say, is that we have some studies that show you're at an increased risk if you have ADHD to have some of these cognitive decline challenges.
Right.
So unfortunately, ADHD doesn't protect you. It actually puts you a little bit more in the risk group for having some of these aging-related cognitive declines. So it's really important, and this is where having a good record of your ADHD symptoms from before, this is where having someone come with you to some of these appointments as your age could help. This is where I recommend professionals to do a good history interview. But we can talk about this hours and hours.
For sure. Well, I would love to end. We've got some, let's just say sad comments are starting to come in the chat room. So the sad reality of those of us with our lot in life tied to
it's
ADHD.
Okay, we'll forget. It's
Well,
okay.
yeah.
We'll forget it.
We'll forget it. Yeah, it's fine. Everything's fine.
Well, let's just turn the attention as we get to wrapping up on how to shift the narrative and how we think of ourselves and our relationship with memory. How do you coach people to reposition how they look at their own memory?
So, first thing we need to think about memory as a strainer. Things are going to fall through the holes. Okay. So, if that is our strategy, we need to think about ways to catch what's falling if it's important and not try to catch everything. So, one
Yeah.
language shift we need to kind of understand is we need to put the effort on what's important. Like remembering our friend's birthday might be very important, but remembering, the phone number of the pizzeria we grew up with might not be as important. So, putting
Mhm.
our efforts where it's important. The other is taking a language of explaining to others when we fall back, when things happen, instead of saying things like, "Oh my God, I have such a terrible memory," or "I didn't care and I didn't remember." Putting the language, talking to ourselves in a way of, "I did not support my memory enough," or "I need to change the strategies I'm using to try to remember this." Instead of saying things like, "I'm a terrible person, I can't remember your birthday." Because it's
Right.
not
Okay.
coming from not caring about that person, right?
Right.
Now, you have to apologize if you care enough about that friendship. Yes, don't take this as a giving you a permission to
A
forget someone's
pass. Yeah.
birthday.
Right.
But what I'm giving you permission is to use the language towards yourself is, I am not doing this on purpose. I am not using maybe the right tools. Maybe I need to change strategy. And then when you want to ask for help, it's also having a better language to ask for that support. So we talk a lot about here in the world of ADHD about, scaffolding and strategies and tools. We don't talk so much about being nice to ourselves,
Yeah.
talking to ourselves like we want other people to talk to us, talking to ourselves as if we want to talk to our kids, the same way we would talk if we were, so using that language towards our memory is really important.
I think that's really an important observation because in our experience, I mean, and we've talked about exactly that point about like, look at the language you use to talk to yourself. It's generally terrible. But memory seems to be a box outside of that language set, right? Because memory is for some reason so deeply entwined in our ADHD that it almost never gets a pass. And I mean, I don't know about you, Nikki, but for me, hearing you say, I did not use my memory to its greatest effect is really eye-opening language. I've never heard it because I'm so used to, oh, my memory is terrible.
Yeah, that's the go-to for sure.
Right,
Mhm.
right.
And
That's
and
news.
I would add another one. If you're in a relationship, a work relationship with a partner, a family relationship, a spouse, you will find that there's a lot of negative talk around memory and forgetfulness. We do a lot of, but I told you that, or I can't believe you
Yes.
forgot. And there's a lot of, and changing the narrative to, that's new to me, instead of you didn't tell me. Like I'm the problem, or I'm the one that didn't get it. I didn't register. It wasn't like it didn't process. I didn't attend to that. That is taking ownership to your forgetfulness without having a battle. Did the person tell you or not, or necessarily even needing that battle? Shifting the
Right.
language to, and then putting on the other spouse. Listen, if you're going to tell me about this important event with your mother that we need to go to, but you're telling it to me while I'm watching Game of Thrones or while I'm listening to my podcast, oh, just assume I didn't hear you. So
Right, right.
there's a
That's that
conversation,
asking for that support, right?
but it's
Like,
also awareness to the part, like, so it's about awareness to, when can I encode information? When can I multitask? When can I listen to you? I noticed that when I talk with my kids in the car, when they're actually not looking at me, they retain a lot more information than when I'm making them focus on my face. We were told so many years, look at me, I'm talking to you. I can tell you that's the worst advice. I can tell you that my kids do better when I talked with them when they weren't looking at me, because they were teenagers and looking at me took too much effort and too much attention, and they weren't focusing on what I'm saying because they're focusing on looking at me. I can tell you that when I worked with my colleagues and I let them take notes about important things while we're working, them looking down and taking notes doesn't mean they're not paying attention to me. actually maybe they're focusing more. So shifting a bit of what means paying attention is also will help us remember.
So before we end, I just want to ask you, like, what are some tips or strategies that you can, give to the audience as we start to wrap up that maybe they could even just try today, like something simple that they can take away?
So the one thing is if they're trying to remember something, don't trust themselves. Don't trust your working memory. It has a 1 minute limit. So try to support it. So write things down, put things with reminders, all those things. Like just go under the assumption, have that assumption. My memory has a 1 minute limit. I
Yeah.
need to shift things into the long term, and to shift things into the long term, I need to support it. Or need to say it out loud, or write it down, or build a story behind it, or put it in a palace. Like I
All
need
of
to
these
do
things. Yeah.
something to move it. I'm not trustworthy. Not me as me, but my working memory is not trustworthy. It's like a little toddler, and the toddler needs help, and I'm going to help it in a positive way instead of a
Mhm.
And talk
judgmental
nice
way.
about it and talk nice about me. Yeah. Yeah.
And then my other takeaway is that forgetting is not the enemy. And so
Mm.
understanding that if you forgot something, you're not a terrible person because you can't remember everything, and you need to think about what can I do to support next time? How can I change this? What do I need to do? And who do I need to say sorry to? That kind of is the mind shift we need to do. And it might be myself I need to say sorry to. I forgot
Yeah.
something that was important to me. I can apologize to me. Future Daniella is sorry to past Daniella that she didn't remember to do this.
That is actually a really important reminder that the relationship we have with ourselves over time matters too, because I don't want to live my present day full of yesterday's Pete's regrets, right? Like I can't live my life that way. I can't move forward and see what's in store for tomorrow.
So
Pete.
you need to learn from Pete's mistakes and build on them instead of live in Pete's regrets.
Yeah, right.
Ah,
Oh,
great. Good
Daniella,
stuff.
what a
Wow.
gift. Holy cow. Yeah, you'll be back on memory. We're going to continue this
For
conversation.
sure.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Of course.
And
It was a
thank
pleasure.
you. Oh, such a joy. Thank you, everyone, for downloading and listening to the show. We sure appreciate you remembering to show up and listen.
That's right.
We appreciate your time and your attention. And don't forget, if you have something to contribute about the conversation, we're heading over to our Show Talk channel in our Discord server, and you can join us right there by becoming a supporting member at the deluxe level or better. On behalf of Nikki Kinzer and Daniella Karidi, I'm Pete Wright, and we'll see you next time right here on Taking Control, the ADHD podcast.